Wayman Tisdale. He was truly a remarkable athlete, an even more fascinating person. You know what really stands out about him? He was this incredible two-way talent, both in basketball and music. Pretty unique combination, right? In basketball, Tisdale was an absolute force in college at Oklahoma from 1982 to 1985. He became the first player in NCAA history to be named a first-team All-American in his freshman, sophomore, and junior years. That's pretty incredible when you think about it. He averaged over 25 points per game in college and was just dominant in the Big 8 conference. The Indiana Pacers picked him second overall in the 1985 NBA draft, and he went on to have a solid 12-year NBA career with the Pacers, Kings, and Suns. While he might not have been a superstar some expected, he was a really reliable player, averaging around 15 points and 6 rebounds per game throughout his career. He had this really smooth left-handed playing style that made him tough to defend. Wayman Tisdale's incredible run at Oklahoma was really something else. His college career from 1982 to 1985 really changed the game for the Sooners basketball program. When Tisdale arrived in Norman in 1982, he immediately made history by becoming the first freshman to be named a first-team All-American. Think about that, a freshman. He averaged 24.5 points and 10.3 rebounds in his first year, which was just mind-blowing for a newcomer to college basketball. But here's what's even more impressive. He didn't slow down one bit. In his sophomore year, he came back even stronger, averaging 27 points per game and again making the All-American team. He was practically unstoppable in the Big 8 conference, which is now part of the Big 12, by the way. His junior year, same story. Another All-American selection, making him the first player in college basketball history to make first-team All-American in his first 3 years. He was putting up about 25.6 points per game and bullying everyone in the paint with his left-handed moves. During his time in Oklahoma, he set records that still stand today. He racked up 2,661 points and 1,048 rebounds in just 3 years. Here's a fun fact. His jersey number 23 was the first number ever retired by the University of Oklahoma's basketball program. That's how much of an impact he made. The thing about Tisdale that really stood out was his consistency. He scored a double figures in every single college game he played, all 104 of them. That's just unreal when you think about it. He was also known for being this really positive, smiling presence on the court, even when he was dominating opponents. Tisdale was so dominant that he decided to leave the NBA after his junior year. And honestly, who could blame him? He literally done everything he could at the college level. Oklahoma basketball hasn't been quite the same since. He set a standard that's pretty tough to match. So after that incredible run at Oklahoma, the Pacers selected him second overall in the 1985 NBA draft, right behind Patrick Ewing. Pretty high expectations, right? His rookie season with the Pacers in 1985-86 was solid. He averages around 14.7 points and 7.2 rebounds per game. Not bad for a rookie. He had this really smooth left-handed game that made him tough to defend, especially in the post. While he might not have been dominant like he did in college, he was definitely holding his own in the NBA. In his second season, Tisdale started to find his groove a bit more. He bumped his scoring average up to 15.9 points per game and became more comfortable in the Pacers system. By his third season, he was putting up some of his best numbers with Indiana, averaging 16.8 points and 7.4 rebounds per game. One thing that's interesting about the Pacers' tenure is how he dealt with transition from being the guy in college to being part of a rebuilding team. Pacers weren't exactly title contenders back then. They were trying to find their identity, and Tisdale was part of that process. But the 1988 and 89 season, his last with Indiana, he was still putting up good numbers. But the team decided to go in a different direction. They traded him to the Sacramento Kings in 1989, looking to shake things up. You know what's kind of funny? The Pacers started their real rise to prominence right after Tisdale left, with Reggie Miller becoming the face of the franchise. But Tisdale had helped lay some groundwork during those rebuilding years. While his time with the Pacers might not have lived up to the sky-high expectations that come with being the number 2 pick, he was still a reliable scorer and rebounder who gave some solid years. It's worth noting that transitioning from college superstar to NBA role player isn't easy, but Tisdale handled it with the characteristic positive attitude. But what's clear is that Tisdale's time with the Pacers, while not spectacular, was definitely respectable and helped him establish himself as a solid NBA player. Tisdale's time with the Sacramento Kings was actually where he played some of his best NBA basketball. The Kings acquired him from the Pacers in 1989, and it turned out to be a great move for both Tisdale and the team. His first season with the Kings in 1989-90 was probably his best year as a pro. He really found his groove, averaging 22.3 points and 7.5 rebounds per game, which were career-high numbers. He was finally getting to show some of that scoring touch that he had made him such a force in college. As a left-handed power forward, he had this unique style that made him tough to defend. What's interesting about the Kings' tenure is that even though the team wasn't winning a lot of games, Tisdale remained his consistently positive presence. He was putting up strong numbers, averaging around 16 to 20 points per game throughout most of his time there, and becoming a fan favorite in Sacramento because of his upbeat personality and reliable play. One thing that really stands out about his Kings years was his durability. He was playing heavy minutes and rarely missed games, which is pretty impressive for a big man. He was also versatile enough to play both power forward and center when needed, which gave the Kings some flexibility. By the 1993-94 season, his last season with the Kings, he was still such a solid contributor, though his role had started to change a bit as the team brought in younger players. The Kings were still struggling to become competitive in the Western Conference, but Tisdale had given them some of their few bright spots during those years. You know what's kind of neat? Even while he was playing for the Kings, he had already started to pursue his music career on the side. He'd bring his bass guitar on road trips and sometimes jam in his hotel room after games. That's just classic Tisdale, always balancing basketball and his other passions. Tisdale's time with the Kings represented the peak of his NBA career in terms of individual performance, even if the team's success wasn't there. Wayman Tisdale's final NBA chapters with the Phoenix Suns, it was quite different from his earlier stops. After being the main guy in Sacramento, he took on more of a six-man role in Phoenix, which actually turned out to be a pretty good fit. The Suns were a much better team than the Kings when Tisdale joined them in 1994. They had Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson, and Dan Marley. They were real contenders, so Tisdale had to adjust from being the primary scorer to being a key contributor off the bench. In his first season with the Suns, 1994-95, he averaged around 10 points in around 20 minutes per game. While those numbers might not jump out at you, he was exactly what the Suns needed, a reliable scorer who could give them instant offense off the bench. Plus, he was finally on a winning team. The Suns made the playoffs, which was a nice change of pace from after all those years struggling in Sacramento. The 95-96 season was similar. He kept providing that steady scoring punch off the bench. That made Tisdale valuable to the Suns, was his ability to come in and get buckets without needing a lot of plays called for him. He could score in the post, hit the mid-range jumpers, and just knew how to get some points efficiently. His final NBA season was the 96-97 campaign, where he saw him playing time decrease a bit, but he was still contributing when called upon. By this point, he was already thinking about a transition to his music career. He'd been working on his bass guitar skills throughout the NBA career, and you could tell he was ready for that next chapter. What's really cool about his Suns years is that even though he wasn't putting up big numbers for the Kings days, he seemed to really embrace his role. He was still the same positive, smiling presence in the locker room, and fans in Phoenix loved him for that. After the 1997 season, at age 32, Tisdale decided to hang up his basketball shoes and focus full-time on his music career. It was a pretty smooth transition since he'd been preparing for it throughout his NBA career. Tisdale's time with the Suns showed his ability to adapt and contribute to a winning team, even if it meant taking on a smaller role. It was a fitting end to a solid NBA career. And here's what makes the story even more interesting. During his NBA career, he was already pursuing his other passion, music. He was an accomplished bass guitarist and later became a successful jazz musician after retiring from basketball in 1997. I think it's amazing how he managed to excel in both fields. Sadly, Tisdale passed away in 2009 after battling cancer, but he left behind quite a legacy. The NCAA even named their Freshman of the Year award after him, which really speaks to his impact on college basketball. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video and stay safe.